Hello friends, we're now in the depths of summer, so I thought it was about time I gave you an updated knitting podcast. So grab your project, a snack, a cool refreshing drink so you're staying hydrated, and let's dive into what I'm knitting. So in the gap between the last one of these I filmed and now, it is very much gone from spring, winter really, to summer. So I have a fair amount of finished objects. I have some whips, and I have a plan or two that I want to share with you. And they very much range from still wintry things that I'm knitting, because I refuse to put too much away over the summer, because once autumn comes around I'm going to want to be wearing them immediately, and if I don't knit them over the summer then I won't have them to wear. And also some summery things, because I get to this weather and I'm like, I want to be wearing what I make. So I have both categories in my on the go things I'm finishing. I'm going to get straight into it, and first up touch on one of the projects that was a whip in my last one that I did finish sort of, and is now in storage. So I only have photos to show you, but this is my vest number 2 by My Favourite Things. This I started in February and I think it took me about a month to knit. It is the spring edition of the pattern, and so thinner yarn, thinner needles. I held 3 yarns together for this. A mystery, probably wool, very light fingering, I think, maybe even lace weight to be honest. It's very thin. Mystery cone of yarn I had that was really lovely, but I wanted a bit more interest, so I added in Make It Tweed, which is an amazing fun yarn that I definitely recommend if you haven't tried it before. You essentially hold it with any yarn you like and it makes it kind of fleckly and tweedy. The one that I have makes it like a rainbowy tweed, and I love that, but I needed something to bring both of those together because they looked a bit too contrasty by themselves. So I then added in a mohair as well, and all of these yarns together made for an interesting fabric, and I do like it. But this pattern, I don't know whether I chose the wrong size, whether it's intended to be oversized, but I was so specific about the vest pattern that I chose, because I don't wear vests in my wardrobe. I went through a phase earlier this year where I really desperately wanted to try and make them work for me. I've kind of concluded I don't. There's a few exceptions that on a rare occasion I feel like wearing, and I just don't see this fitting in particularly. It's currently packed away for winter storage. We'll see how I feel when it comes out in the autumn, but it just didn't end up fitting how I wanted it to. The other thing is that I think, again, with the sizing, I don't know if my gauge was off, it measured right, but the shoulders, before I'd done the finishing around the armholes for the shoulders, they were already about the width I wanted them. So I ended up starting to wear it without finishing the armholes, and then I kind of concluded that I don't need to finish the armholes because I like the fit better without. But we'll see, maybe I'll finish the armholes and give it away if I don't end up wearing it very much. So a bit of an experiment in my wardrobe, probably a little bit of a fail, but I'm glad I at least tried it. The next one, I promise not all of these are in storage, but the next one is also in storage, and so I will just touch on it. And I knit a gorgeous pressed flowers kerchief. This was one that I impulsively cast on and knit. I just needed something easy and that felt like knitting. I don't know how to explain that, but a lot of the projects, I've been doing a lot of colour work and I am really enjoying it, but there's a lot of putting down of the yarn and picking it up because I'm English style and I'm getting good tension that way, but I just was missing something satisfying and continuous knitting. And yes, this is colour work, but it is mosaic knitting, and I really want to try more mosaic knitting. I really fell in love with it, this project. It's a very easy one. If you want to try it yourself, it's a free pattern, and you can basically knit it with any yarn you like, because it's one of those where the size isn't as important. So great for stash busting. I ended up using some yarn kind of stolen from another project, so I may need to replace it later, and then just some that I had in my stash that I bought for swatching for something that I didn't end up using it for. Both of them were Peruvian Highland wool from Filcolana, in the shade mustard and I want to say teal, and they just look so good together that, yeah, I have so many ideas that have been sparked by this one little project in terms of mosaic knitting, because it was just such a fun process. If you've never done mosaic knitting before, you essentially knit 2 rounds in one colour and then switch and do the other, and you slip stitches in certain places and funky things that make a pattern appear in a really cool way. And I was just such a big fan of this style of knitting, so definitely going to do that again in the future. Then we get on to my sunflower jumper. I am just so proud of this one. I love it so much. If you missed it, I did do a full vlog of me knitting it that I posted on my channel, and I have also released the chart for the sunflower on the front, which is duplicate stitch, but I'm getting ahead of myself. For my birthday this year, I wanted to spend a full day knitting and watching Lord of the Rings, and in the little chaotic mindset that I have sometimes, I thought I want to see if I can knit a whole jumper in a day, just to see if I can, because I have very little idea how long it takes me to knit things. I tend to just sink hours, time blind, ADHD style into stuff. I think I get through knitted projects quite quickly, but I have no idea if that's because I just spend more time knitting them or because I am a fast knitter. So I still actually don't really know. I knit about half of this jumper in that time, spoiler alert for the video, but I did finish it in a weekend, which I do think is pretty crazy, even for a 5 or 6 millimeter needle hour and weight project. I think if it had been bulky yarn, that would have made more sense. But I also redid parts of it a good couple times, like the neckline. So I must be a relatively fast knitter, I think. But I also designed the whole thing myself. I wrote out the pattern for myself. I think there's a few tweaks I would make in the future. I do want to use it again, but I'm so happy with like the rolled hem on the cuffs, and the neckline, and all of the ribbing has rolled hems, the way that I did the raglans with this cool pattern. And originally I just wanted a nice plain sweater that I could pull over anything and would go with a lot of stuff. However, after wearing it a couple of times, I just got this itch that it was too boring. I felt like it needed something, and so I drew a sunflower based on one that we had at our wedding, and put it into Stitch Fiddle, played around a fair amount to make this chart, and duplicate stitched it. The yarn I used for the whole project was Rowan Felted Tweed, which is one of my favourite yarns. I don't know which way I'd put them around, but my 2 top yarns of all time, Peruvian Highland Wool by Filcolana and Rowan Make It Tweed. And if I had to only pick one, I would have a very bad time choosing. So I'm not even going to think about it. But for the actual jumper, it's in the Aran weight, and the colour I think is Sea Storm. And then for the duplicate stitches, it is the DK weight, the regular weight, but held double. And it just gives it such a cool texture, such an interesting depth to it. The duplicate stitching took me probably about as long as making the jumper, but I think it was so worth it in the end. I hope you agree. And genuinely, if you want to add a sunflower to anything, I will link the chart below. It's only £1, or if you want it for free, then code PLEASE will make it free on Ravelry. Let's talk about socks. I almost always have a sock project on the go. I actually don't write at this minute, but we'll talk about that in a second, because I have finished 2 pairs of socks since we last spoke, and one of them is self-drafted and one of them is one I've been talking about for ages. So if you have watched any of my previous podcasts, you probably will be slightly relieved by it. But the first one, the self-drafted one, because I finished these first, are these gingham socks. I am so happy with these. I designed them to look like the table runners we had at our wedding, and the plan is, and I've put these in the finished object because I have finished knitting, but the plan is to duplicate stitch little sunflowers onto the sides of them. I did attempt to do it colour work in a number of ways, and then just concluded it wasn't the way, because I didn't want it going all the way around. I just wanted it on one side, and you can't do that except in intarsia, and you can't knit intarsia in the round, so it was just overcomplicating it when it would be far easier to just duplicate stitch. The yarn is just Drops Fable. I've never used it for a whole project. I've used it as part of other projects. I don't know that it's my favourite sock yarn. It's a little bit woolier than other sock yarns that I've used. I have worn them a couple times, but not enough to really say anything about the wear, and I haven't even really sewn in any of the ends. So that tells you a lot, I think, and it's just too warm now to be wearing woolly socks. I am incredibly proud of myself for making these. I figured out so many things whilst making them. The construction is a heel flap gusset, which is my favourite sock construction. I've tried a couple others, they've never really fit quite right. I probably will try more in the future, but this is my favourite. The difficulty with colourwork socks and heel flaps and gussets is that when you get to the decreasing for the gusset, you run into difficulties with continuing the pattern. And so doing the maths for figuring out where I needed to place each bit when I pick them back up, and then how I needed to create the gusset section, it hurt my head a little bit. However, I figured it out, and I think it just looks so good. I might possibly one day make this a pattern, but I think there are gingham sock patterns out there, so I'd have to look and see whether it would actually be unique. My only qualm with them, I guess, is they are a little bit big. I think I need to adjust the size, either the size needles or the number of stitches I'm doing for my colourwork socks, because I think I was overcompensating, making them bigger for not being too tight, and then have ended up with them being a bit too loose. But they're wearable, they're just a little bit loose. Then my second finished pair of socks. I am so excited to announce I did it! I finished the chicken socks! These are the Herding Hens socks by Stone Knits, and I have been saying I'm going to knit these for well over a year. My birthday in 2025, I bought some yarn. The pattern then promptly came out, I think at the end of March last year, and ever since I've been saying I'm going to make them and haven't gotten to it. I cast these on at some point in March. I finished them on June 18th, so it did take me a little while. I actually knit the second sock in about a week, and I think there are points where you can see my colourwork tension improve throughout the sock knitting process. Certainly up here it's looser, and then it neatens up, and it's still nice and stretchy, but this second sock definitely looks, if you're being pernickety and looking too close, it definitely looks a little bit neater. I have the biggest flex, and that is that Stone Knits now follows me on Instagram, because I tagged her in making the socks, and honestly the thing that drove me to finish these faster was the fact that she'd commented, and I need to finish these socks for Charlotte. If for no one else, for Charlotte. Boo! Sorry, this is Editing Rosie coming at you because I forgot to say one of the most important things about these socks, which is that I made a major alteration and swapped out the short row heel for a heel flap and gusset, which, as I said earlier, is a bit complicated when you're doing colour work, but I have written out exactly what I did on my Ravelry if you are interested in doing the same. And I mean, I'm very happy with the resulting sock, how it turned out. Anyway, back to talking about the yarn I used. The yarn I used, I can't believe I've not spoken about this yet. The yarn I used was Crazy Ball, Zaba Crazy Ball. The moment that I saw that yarn and the pattern, I knew that that yarn was made to be socks. But because it's a variegated yarn, picking the contrast colour was so hard because so many of them were just not going to have a good enough contrast for the chickens. I wanted to do red, but as you can kind of see, there's red in some of the chickens, and also their little hats. Hats is the wrong word, but the little head bits are also red, and I just couldn't work out another colour that would still read chickens, so red was sadly not an option. There are points where the colour gets quite close, but I think it's okay. I think it's fine. My only disappointment in the yarn is that on the foot of the second sock, they kind of all look the same. I kind of wish that between them I maybe cut and moved a bit along the gradient, but I didn't, and this is what we've got, and it's on the foot anyway, so it's fine. But yeah, I'm just so happy with these. I think they're one of the coolest things I've made. Again, with the size, they're a little bit bigger than most of my other socks, but with them being colour work, I think I'd rather them be slightly oversized than anything. But I think in future I'm probably going to do a size down in stone knit patterns and see if that fits me slightly better. But I think that is everything I have to say about these socks. I love them so much. There we go, that's the finished objects. Onto whips. There are less whips than there are finished objects, partly because I am hibernating too, that I have talked about previously. Firstly, the gingham jumper. It's just it's colour work in like Aran weight. It's too thick to even be thinking about in this weather. And then my hood shawl thing that I'm making is also in hibernation, just because, again, I'm not going to be wearing it in this weather, and it's going to be quite quick when it gets to the autumn, so I don't mind leaving it for a little bit. But let's get on to one that, again, I've been talking about for ages. I can't remember where I was with this last knitting podcast, but I actually haven't touched it in a while. However, I have made a lot of progress. The problem I have, and I'm going to say this straight away, is that my tension is loose. I sized up needles. My tension theoretically was correct in my swatch and all of that, although I don't think I properly swatched. But ignoring that, theoretically I was using the right needle size if my tension was my English style knitting. However, when I first started doing colour work, was doing a combination where I was holding one colour in one hand and the other, so it was English knitting and continental knitting at the same time, and that works really nicely for a smoother knitting experience. However, I've worked out that my tension is just so much better with just dropping the yarn and English knitting, because when I do it the other way I end up with really loose colour work, which is not a problem I see many people have. Most people, their colour work is too tight. I am maybe 4 or 5 rows from the end of the colour work chart for this. Annoyingly, I'm contemplating starting over, just because I want this to be perfect. And my colour work has improved, even just in the short space of time since doing this. I think what I need to do is finish the yoke, split for sleeves, and then maybe do a collar, and then I will have a good idea of whether it really is going to be way too big or whether I can make it work as an oversized thing. and hopefully not run out of yarn. I will almost certainly go off pattern to do the rest of this, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. It is so gorgeous and soft. I forget how nice it is. I am holding 2 earth yarn mohairs, Bon Mohair in the colours Smoke and Dawn, and then the contrast colour, well, I guess the main colour for the body, is this off-white West Yorkshire Spinners Exquisite, which is discontinued. I think I may have a little bit of trouble finding more yarn if I need it, but I think I have enough. I'll be fine. It's fine, right? Right? Now let's talk about summer knitting. This is one that I started in June last year and had zero motivation to get back on it until randomly, like last week or the week before, I got it out and was like, I don't know why I've left this. It's not even in a difficult to pick up place. Like, I know what I'm doing, having looked at it for 2 seconds. I think I just thought that I had complicated things to work out because I'm self-drafting it, and I really didn't. And so I'm very happy that I've picked it up because it's gonna be so cute, and I have made a lot of progress. This is what I've kind of called the Ravioli Cardi because the swatch that I did looked like a piece of ravioli. Do you see it? You kind of see the edges look like ravioli. The yarn is Drops Bell. It's my first project in Drops Bell. I really like it. It's really cooling, which for summer yarn, I think it's a linen cotton viscose blend. Linen's 14%. 53% cotton viscose. So the cooling will be the viscose, I imagine. It's just really nice. It's a bit splitty at moments knitting with it, but I don't mind too much. I probably wouldn't crochet with it. She says, I'll show you in a sec. I am actually crocheting with it, but not for a whole project. But I really wanted a very specific summer cardigan and couldn't find a pattern for it. There are now patterns that have since come out that are I probably would have knit if I was looking, but I'm so glad that I made this because I think it's so cool. I've even put the buttons on the front. It's raglan. One of my favourite details is that I have done little I think they're faux cables, fake cables, in the raglan increases, and then these eyelets, which I'm slightly obsessed with. It's about as much lace knitting as I can take is an eyelet, and especially when they're sort of every chunk of plain knitting split apart, so I don't even have to think about them that often. And then I think the most impressive, the coolest part of this, and I'm so obsessed. I need to calm down. The collar, placket and bottom finishing. It's not ribbing, but it's where ribbing would be. I did something that I've not seen anyone do before. I've never done it before in a pattern. I've not seen it in things I've observed, but it was a little bit of a risk because it could have gone really badly, and it did take quite a bit of time to do. To create these picot edges, I've knitted up and folded over and done yarn overs on this row. So let me see if I can sort of show you. So I've essentially, there's a hole between the stitches and the decreases. So when it's folded over, it does this. The other thing I've done is at the corners, I increased on one side, and then on the other side, I've done a central double decrease so that you get these kind of mitered, sorry, that's a woodworking term, but you get these like beautifully right angle corners without, like, I didn't have to sew that. That is all knitted in one piece. And the way I had to do this was pick up stitches all the way along the neckline, all the way down one front, keep the stitches on the body, and then go up the other side of the front and back around the collar and essentially knit in the round all the way around the edge of the cardigan, which was slightly insane because I was also on like 2.5mm needles. However, it worked out and I'm so pleased. The only like slight bit that I would maybe have adjusted is the buttonholes. The buttonholes are just yarn overs. What I should have done was yarn overed and wrapped around a couple of times, but I didn't think of that until I was coming back. So they're just a little bit tight. And I think there probably were better ways of doing the buttonholes, but I didn't want to have to put any stitches on hold or go back and forth at any point because it was already complicated enough. That is what I ended up with, and it works. Does it work perfectly? No, but it works, so I'm not gonna bash it. I'm so pleased with how this is coming out. I just have the sleeves to go. I haven't decided what I'm gonna do at the cuffs. I think I probably will do the same finishing as the rest of it rather than ribbing. Ribbing naturally cinches in. You get this problem where you do have to size down quite a bit needle size wise, because otherwise it would flare out. And also the additional problem with a yarn like this is that it doesn't have the elasticity that say wool has. So if it's flaring out, it's going to flare out worse and not bounce back and not be blockable. You can't block out a flare in this kind of yarn. So I might still do ribbing on the sleeves, or I might do the same and just use the really tiny needles again. The thing I'm thinking is that the flaring might be slightly more obvious on the sleeves if it happens, or it's like it might be more prone to flare, especially if I roll it up at all. So that might be why I opt for ribbing, if I do opt for ribbing. But I think I'm leaning towards this at the moment. I'm so excited to finish that. However, it has temporarily gone on hold for another project that I'm working on. This type of knitted item has been on my want to knit list for ages, and randomly I applied for a test knit and got accepted, and so I'm ticking it off my bucket list, and that is knitted shorts. And these are the Fausta shorts by Lowkey Bold Knits. Like I said, it's a test knit, so the pattern isn't out yet, but I will link Lowkey Bold Knits down below, and or if the pattern is out by now, that, and then you can find it when it is, because I am so enjoying these. It is such an addictive knit. I've heard people talk about not liking doing ribbing, like 2x2 ribbing, because it gets a bit tedious. I find it so addictive. There's just something about it that I've not wanted to put this down. We're talking 3mm needles, and I cast this on 3 days ago. And this is my progress. I do need to slow down a bit because I was getting a bit of arm ache. The pattern so far has been great, but obviously I'm doing the test knit, so I can't really comment on the final pattern. If there are any problems with the final pattern, you'll have to blame me for not bringing them up. The recommended pattern yarn is maroon cot. Anyway, it's one that I didn't really have access to ordering in the UK as easily. I had a look. There were some places I could, but the colours that were available were just, I didn't like them. So I went for Drops Cotton Merino, which is very similar, and the gauge is matching up just fine. The colour, I'm obsessed with. I think it's so pretty. It's just such a gorgeous colour. The yarn is really nice. It's Drops Cotton Merino. I think people have said a lot on it. It's my first time using it, and I'm impressed with how smooth it is. It is, again, a little bit splitty, like it's not super tightly plied, but I think you kind of get that with any cotton based yarn with like a high enough amount of cotton. This is 50-50, so hopefully the wool will be doing its job in terms of elasticity and things like that, although it is superwash, which I hadn't realised when I bought it. But that does mean that I will be able to put these in the wash, which will be nice for shorts, I think. I don't mind hand washing the majority of my hand knitted wardrobe because I prefer non-superwash yarn, but there are some cases where you do kind of just want to be able to put them in the wash, and I think a pair of shorts, especially in the summer, is definitely one of those. I anticipate finishing these very quickly, and so far I think you should get the pattern when it comes out. Not that I'm biased for test knitting them or anything, but I think they're going to be really cute. I'm very excited to see the rest of the test knitters across different sizes and colours and things, to see how they turn out across a range. But for me, I'm very excited. Then my last work in progress summer project is not actually knitting, it's crochet, but please forgive me because I do plan on incorporating knitting into this project. And also it's my knitting podcast. I'll do what I want. I am making a granny square project. I have accumulated a lot of fingering weight cotton yarn from various sources, but largely my husband likes buying me Soston and Gren's yarn as like little gifts when he buys me little gifts. So I've sort of accumulated more than I know what to do with. So I got all of it in one bag, and when I'm going to do random granny squares, and I shall make a granny square jumper. I saw one on Instagram and immediately was like, yes, I need a colourful granny square jumper for the summer. I've started assembling, which I'll show you in a second, because I'm going to do it as like a drop shoulder construction. And my construction knowledge from knitting is very much being transferred here in how I'm figuring out how to do it in crochet. Because obviously this is a bunch of squares, how are you going to shape it in a way? And I can very easily just do square front, square back, and figure out something around the neckline relatively easily. However, I want this to fit nicely. I want it to be really comfy for the summer. If it's off on the neck, I will feel it. So I've done some neckline shaping. I'm so pleased with this. This is going to be such a cool jumper. I'm so excited. I don't know which of my summer projects I want to finish first because I want to wear all of them. But you know what? I should try and finish this in time for Pride, which is August in Brighton. Oh, how cool would this be for Brighton Pride? Woo! Ignore how many ends there are. I have actually woven in a decent amount of ends. I've been kind of doing it as I go on the actual granny squares, but it's just the nature of the project. It's going to end up with lots of ends. But what I've essentially done, and I don't know crochet very well, I don't know what the official techniques are, I about know how to do a granny square. I'm not even sure what stitch I use for my granny squares. I'm very much just transferring what I know from knitting, and what I essentially did to create this drop shoulder shaping was short rows. I chained all of these stitches along here, and then I did granny squares into them, leaving I think 2 between each one, and then went a bit further each time along to create this slope, and then attached it the same way that I attached the rest of the squares together. I'm so happy with how it's looking. I now need to attach the front panels, which, because of the size of my granny squares, I've had to make one granny square that's missing a bit so that the width on between the neck and the shoulder works out to the right size. And then my plan is to pick up the stitches around the neckline and knit in the neckline like you would for a regular knitted drop shoulder. I hope that makes sense. In terms of the yarn I'm using for this, like I said, it's a hodgepodge of all sorts, largely Soston Gren. There's a bit of Drops Bell in there, and then there's 1 or 2 random other ones that I just have in my stash from various things. All in all, I'm gonna have to crochet a lot more granny squares to finish this, but now that I have a bit of a deadline for myself, I think I will get back on this. Now, last but not least, let's talk about the plan. As I said earlier, I almost always have a sock project on the go, so I thought I'd tell you about the sock project I want to cast on. In March, Stone Knits released a new pattern sock set so 2. And I don't know what it is about March Stone Knit releases that are my patterns, but it was a pigeon and duck sock set. And Lucy Locketland was selling yarn for the pigeon socks, and I believe they also did the duck socks as well. With some birthday money, I bought the sock set for the pigeons, and I'm very excited. I think this is going to be my next cast on. It's very cool because it's come with just the right amounts of everything. In terms of what's already in my sock stash, I kind of have the stuff for ducks, but I didn't for pigeons. So I'm going to do these next. I'm very excited about it. This is Superwash 75-25% blue-faced Leicester wool with nylon. They're just so pretty, and I think gonna make the best little pigeons. I'll put it back in my sock project bag. This is such a good project bag. It's just a little handbag I found in a charity shop, but it's got like a little pouch inside it which I can put my notions in. It probably is big enough to have a bit more of a medium-sized project as well, but I've been using it for my sock projects. So there we go. That is everything. Thank you for catching up with me. Thank you for staying till the end. Let me know what you're working on. Is it summer? Is it just continuing with whatever you want to knit, regardless of the weather? Are you the kind of person who doesn't really knit over the summer? I think a lot of people do sort of put it away and have it as a seasonal hobby, which is totally fine. I do, I think, a bit less knitting over the summer and more sewing and other things. But as you can see, I still do a lot of knitting. I hope you have a lovely week, and I will see you soon. Bye.